It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Oh, yeah. Welcome to a very special live Rico Brogna from Das Beer Garden here in beautiful Florida. I've got a Moscow Mule. It tastes very, very good, and we're getting ready for a little fake baseball because the Mets are going to play a spring training game here in Jupiter, Florida against the Miami Marlins, and we are doing a live Rico today. By the way, before we say anything about the Mets, honestly, the lead story around the New York Mets, believe it or not, is Gerrit Cole. I'm telling you right now, because this is a reminder of why David Stearns doesn't want to give long-term contracts to pitchers, because these guys get hurt constantly. Gerrit Cole was the most reliable starting pitcher in baseball until he wasn't. Until for 2 straight years, and who knows how bad this injury is going to turn out, you have a guy breaking down before your eyes. So when David Stearns, and I argue with him, doesn't want to sign Corbin Burns and doesn't want to sign Max Fried, doesn't want to sign any big-time pitcher, it's this kind of fear that a guy is going to get hurt and break down before your eyes. So it's still frustrating because I would still take a gamble on signing a big arm, but Gerrit Cole breaking down is a reminder. It's a reminder to all of us that no matter how good someone is, we saw it with Jake, no matter how good someone is, no matter how reliable someone is, if you're a starting pitcher in Major League Baseball, it is inevitable that you're going to break down. That's the truth. And we do appreciate everybody who's come out to Das Beer Garden. It's a beautiful location. I appreciate them hosting a live Rico Brogna. Hopefully it sounds okay. And you know who I really appreciate? A broadcaster for the New York Mets who literally said to himself, I have nothing better to do than to hang out with us from Das Beer Garden. And that is Keith Raad, who begins, what is this, year 3 now, broadcasting the Mets?
Year 3, you asked me, can you give me 30, 35, 40 years doing this? So I'm in year 3.
You're on your way. I mean, and by the way, I got to give you credit, Keith. So far, so good. Year 1 was a disaster. I didn't put it on you. Year 2 is, I don't know, one of the most special seasons in Met history. So we have to give you a little bit of credit for that.
You know, I took over for a great broadcaster, Wayne Randazzo, and then we fell on our faces in 2023. 2024, 0 expectations, NLCS. And now this is kind of a calm, confident, comfortable team, and I'm feeling the same way. So this could be a nice year and a beginning of sustainable winning. I know for the Met fan base, just put 2 in a row together, right?
Yeah.
Like that would be nice. So I think we're starting to feel like that.
Let me ask you about Cole. And the reason I wanted to start a Met-related podcast with a Yankees story is I think this is a baseball story, which is why are you going to give long-term contracts, no matter how great a starting pitcher is, when you know inevitably they're going to break down? I've been very mixed about David Stearns' approach to this, but watching Gerrit Cole for a 2nd straight year, possibly miss significant time, makes me wonder if David Stearns is actually smarter than all of us and that it's stupid to give long-term contracts to any starting pitcher. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and even quietly, if you remember, Gerrit Cole had the opt-out, right, in the offseason, and we thought, it's a technicality. The Yankees will add a year, and even the Yankees said, go ahead, see how you do out there. So it's not just the Mets, it's other teams starting to realize that these big long-term deals may not be all that they're cracked up to be, because you sit there and if a guy's out for a year due to injury, that's dead money.
Yep.
And so I know the Mets are looking deep into their depth chart and saying, Paul Blackburn, Tyler McGill, Griffin Canning, they're not sexy names, but they're more names than other teams might have. And so I'm still mixed like you are, because for every Sean Manaea and Luis Severino, there's an Adrian Hauser in there, right? There's something that doesn't work. But for now, you have to let Stearns cook.
No, and that's, I think, the approach most of us have as Met fans. Like, there are moves this offseason that I disagree with, but my attitude is, you know what, this guy's 1 for 1 so far. So your phrase is let Stearns cook. You're kind of right. We have to trust him. But the starting pitcher thing is so risky because we forget Adrian Hauser. I'm glad you brought him up. When I was here last year, I didn't even stay for the game. I had to go back because, family stuff. And Adrian Hauser got bombed. And I remember thinking to myself, not a big deal. It'll be fine. But you never know with these borderline iffy starting pitchers. That's why, like Blackburn, you mentioned, he's had 2 mediocre spring training performances. Mendy says, don't worry, he's just trying to get healthy. But the reality is he could be DFA'd by the middle of May. We don't know.
Yeah, and that's the thing, too, is I heard David Stearns say something recently on a podcast where it's nice to have an ace in the playoffs. Because when we saw the Mets, cut through the wild card and the DS and the championship series, we thought, okay, it'd be nice to have somebody who's going to give you 7. Like Zach Wheeler was amazing. The Mets ended up winning the game against Philadelphia, but it's nice to have somebody that'll give you 7 shutdown innings. But Stern said, I need an ace-like pitcher in the playoffs. Who's hot going into the playoffs? And so when you think about it like that, he's trying to go 150 games, see who's a hot arm, and take that guy into the playoffs thinking he's the ace. Again, I'm still mixed on it because Sean Manaea ran out of gas last year. Severino ran out of gas last year. Senga was up in the air. So we still don't know yet. But we'll see. I guess that's all I have to say about that.
I kind of, with the whole starting pitcher thing, like I think the Yankees are going too far because they've got 3 guys in their 30s signed to long-term contracts, and Carlos Rodon, Max Fried, Garrett Cole, and you're staring into the abyss when guys get hurt. I'd almost do it with one guy in a rotation. Like I think the way I'd build it is I take the gamble on one guy. If it fails, it fails. There's nothing you can do, and then I would kind of do the projects that David Stearns did. But I guess the problem is finding the one guy who's worth giving the long-term contract to. Was it Corbin Burns? Was it Max Fried? Is it Dylan Cease next year? Like, who's the right guy to give that long-term risk contract to? And I think that's the tough thing to figure out because I kind of lean towards Corbin Burns, but I don't know, his velocity's down a little bit. His spin rate's down. Now, that may not mean anything because he's such a professional, but I think that's the way I'd approach it with going after big-time starters.
Yeah, and I think the Mets were in on Yoshinobu Yamamoto. They made it seem like they were. You know, I don't know if that was just a little eyewash to make it seem like they were. They flew to Japan. They met with him. But another guy that's 25, 26, that's going to give you those peak years for a while. Baseball is built in such an unfair way to the players where you're not going to hit free agency until you're 29. The owners got you for cheap for 5-6 years. And now that you hit the market, you want to make up for lost time. And the owners and the GMs like David Stearns say, yeah, but your best is behind you. So at least for now, we can watch Corbin Burns, see how that goes, and Blake Snell and see how that goes. But I like thinking that maybe Kodai Senga is the ace of this team at his best. And it's nice to every 5 days have a guy that's just going to shove. Because the Mets, every time somebody did have a good outing, an opportunity where they did shove, you thought, wow, this is great. But for an ace, that's what they do. And the Mets would love one in Brandon Sproat to create one. We're still in that in-between time where it just feel good, but still unsure. You know?
How many games did you do last year? Did you do 162? Did you do 150? I know Howie takes a lot of breaks, which he deserves. Not ripping the great Howie Rose. But how many did you end up doing last year? How many games did you do last year?
176 with all the playoff games. Every inning of every game, top and bottom. Only 10 of the 32 spring training games. When you do 10 spring training games, Evan, it feels like you've done 30 spring training games.
No, I'm with you already. I scored 1 spring training game. I'm already done, even though I got my scorebook ready for tonight's game. And tonight's game, which unfortunately is not on TV, it's not on radio, so the only people that are going to get to see it are the schlubs like us who are going to the game. Juan Soto made the trip. Just in case Met fans aren't aware of that, Juan freaking Soto decided to drive the 25 minutes from St. Lucie to Jupiter, and we're going to get to see him play baseball today. How pumped are you to see Juan Soto for a baseball season?
First of all, there's a little secret sauce to spring training, right? If you're on the Mets, you're not going to make the road trip. But a lot of these guys live in Jupiter. So Jupiter, the Cardinals, the Marlins, that's the road trip because they're halfway home, Evan. So seeing Juan Soto so far in spring, it is really the real deal. Like it's crazy to walk into the clubhouse and there's the old guy, Pete, Lindor, Nimmo, and you're like, this guy's actually here. Larger than life. He's built like a brick house. That's one way to say it. But he does take his craft so seriously. And when he takes just the subtlest BP or alive, everybody stops. Mendy stops. Carlos Mendoza, David Stearns, Steve Cohen, media, everybody's, the players, they all stop. And it's for a reason. This guy he's the real deal. He homered in his first at bat because I feel like he wanted to and said, I'm gonna do this. So I think the Mets are entering uncharted territory with a guy who is an automatic, can't miss free agent, future Hall of Famer, about to enter his peak years. I mean, I don't take a game off. He doesn't take an at bat off. I'm so pumped for that. I think every Met fan that'll be going, watching, listening, it's going to be an adventure for the next 15 years.
And one thing I warn every Met fan, because it's already happening, is every time he misjudges a fly ball in right field, Yankee fans are going to send us videos saying $765 million for that. Let me tell Yankee fans this, not that they're listening to the Rico Brogna, but maybe they are. We watched Starling Marte like a plotted plant play right field last year. Juan Soto is a Gold Glover, and he was a finalist last year compared to Starling Marte. And I also don't think, and I guess we'll see it full-time this year, I don't think his defense is as bad as people describe it. He's not Roberto Clemente. He's not Vladimir Guerrero, senior that is, but he's not like this bum in right field the way I think some Yankee fans or non-Met fans want to describe him as. And honestly, all he's got to be is average, and I think that's enough.
Yeah, I mean, that's a short part of your game, but if every team is showing up with a $775 million paycheck, it's not like a mess. We're doing something that nobody else was doing. Everybody knows what you're signing up for with Soto. So we'll see how his range is. But I will tell you, the other night, my wife, my daughter were sitting on the berm enjoying a Mets spring training game. Runner at second base hit to right field, and Soto charges the ball, throws a seed home plate. Now the catcher dropped it. I'm going to throw Alvy under the bus here on a Saturday in spring training. But his arm is there. And I really do think that he hears what's going on, the knocks on his defense. And I do think it's not just eyewash that he wants to get better at this. I think the Mets are really good at their analytics department to maybe make him better defensively. So it's definitely not the greatest part of his game. But as Buck used to say about some of the young players, if you're letting in 2 runs and driving in 1, that's bad math. Soto's going to be driving in 4 and maybe letting in 1. That's good math.
Absolutely. Now, before we move on to 2025, I do want to go back to last year because it was awesome. And you went to every regular season game, like you said, you were there. Your favorite, let me start in the regular season, your favorite regular season moment. And it could be the obvious game 161, but there was so many awesome things about last year's regular season. So for you, getting to broadcast basically all of it, give me your favorite moments from what was a very unique regular season that the Mets had last year.
There were just, as you know, because you score every game, there's that random game in Arizona where David Peterson makes a day game start after Edwin Diaz blew it the night before. Peterson comes up with a huge game. Diaz shuts it down in the ninth, and the season was over, and now it's back on again. But really, the culmination of 161 being there, seeing it, certainly the Lindor home run was like, oh my God. But it was because the Mets couldn't hit somebody named Spencer Schwellenbach all season long. And now you're going, this kid is going to do this again on the most important day of the year. He shoves. Braves score 3 late off Diaz, and to come back from that. And I know it's low-hanging fruit, easy pickings, but really, another part of my seat, I'm sitting next to you, Evan. This is lovely. I'm sitting next to Howie Rose, a man who has literally witnessed and sometimes described every big moment in Mets history. The fact that he had goosebumps. And next to us, you have Gary Cohen. He's got goosebumps. But this is really, really big.
Oh, no doubt. This is why I warn Met fans. The Mets could have a great this year. Win 95 games. I have no idea. It is going to be almost impossible to match the goosebumpian moments of a year ago. And I almost equate it to the Knicks. Now, hear me out, and I hate the Knicks, by the way, so it's not like I say this with any kind of love. Last year, they gave their fans magic. They had this great season, and a part of it was the expectations. This year, they went out and they got Karl Anthony Towns, they got Mikal Bridges. Obviously, they're dealing with the Jalen injury right now. But even though their record was better than last year, there was almost this, it's not as fun, we're not as good, we're not as feisty. And I almost think the Met fan may deal with that this year because we had a great year, exceeded expectations. We went out and got one of the best players in baseball. The Met record could be better than what it was. And I could see us as Met fans being like, there's something missing. And I'm warning everyone that because we shouldn't do it. We need to appreciate victories if they're there. But I kind of can get that vibe because last year was so ridiculously unique where there's 10 moments of awesomeness. I don't think that's normal in a regular baseball season.
I liken it to, we're at this lovely Das Beer Garden tonight. And if I said to you, hey, Evan, you're flying down to spring training, you got to go to Das Beer Garden. The beer is the crispest. It's the best. The food, you got to get the burger. It's a 10 out of 10. You're walking in going, wow, this is going to blow me away. And it might be an 8.5 out of 10, but you're going to go, it wasn't a 10 out of 10. And that is all expectations. You're going in thinking you're going to see something magical and amazing. I do think you're going to see sustained winning. I do think you're going to see sustained injuries and bad slumps from this team. And I do think you're going to be in the conversation, maybe in the playoffs every year. I think they're built like that. And the National League, they are still fighting a good fight against the Braves, the Phillies, the Dodgers, the Padres, but they are going to be right there. I think the team last year, we had no expectations. They still did. Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo are a little bit calling David Stearns going, hey, welcome to the Mets. I promise we're still good, right? So they know they're still good. And that's why 161 really meant a lot to me, because once the game was done, Lindor on the field, Nimmo on the field, they're in tears because of how hard it is to just get here, because they knew they could do it. We didn't. Some Mets fans didn't think they were going to do this, but they did it. And so you're walking into this year, these guys have that, again, quiet confidence, different than 22 going into 23. And so I know the expectations are playoffs or bust. Even Steve Cohen says playoffs or bust. But that's the goal. And I think that it's if they do win 88 games, but they get in, is it a bad season?
No.
I don't believe
playoffs. I completely agree with you. It's just making the postseason, but it's weird. In 2022, they have this great regular season, and then they choked at the end of the year. Let's just be blunt. That's what they did. They choked against Atlanta. They choked against San Diego. They come out in 2023. They have a terrible season. Even in 24, as they're defying the odds with the OMG, when they went to Atlanta and they had the rain out, but they had that horrible game one loss, and then they go to Milwaukee and they lose on a Friday, I thought they were dogs. Honestly, I thought, well, what has changed? Nothing's changed about this team. What they were able to do on the Sunday in Milwaukee and the Monday in Atlanta, just those two games, I think changed the perception of that entire core. And then you take it a step further with beating the Brewers, beating the Phillies. But those two games in the regular season, honestly, I think changed the belief in that group, because while that group was talented, as you said, they said to David Stearns, hey, we can win. They may have been talented, but they had a track record of choking. And I thought in 2 days, on a Sunday in Milwaukee and a Monday in Atlanta, they were able to change that narrative and change the way we view them, I think
it was J.D. Martinez who said, by the way, that was like the greatest rain out in Mets history, right? A chance to reset. J.D. Martinez said, I feel this. What is this funk? What is, for lack of a better phrase, what's wrong with you guys? We're a good team. It's just Atlanta is a house of horrors and demons. And so that break gave everybody a chance to go, we're not blowing this. Okay, we're not blowing this. We took a flight to Milwaukee to go back. But I think that they were headed toward the expectations and the demise, and that rainout helped. But before that, like I said, with the Padres series loss in Arizona, and then getting into Philadelphia, they crushed Philly late. Like, they had the belief that they were going to win some of these games. Just Atlanta, I think specifically, the greatest rainout in Mets history to get them to the playoffs.
Yeah.
Reset.
I didn't even think about it at the time, because I think at the moment I was like, screw it, we just got to play and we got to just win a game. But it turned out that way. Now, it's reported, I think the Post reported this a day ago. I don't know if Mendy's made it official yet, but he's leaning towards Lindor 1, Soto 2, Pete 3, and then based on the matchup, Vientos or Nimmo 4 and 5. What do you think? I mean, listen, this is a tremendous lineup. This could be maybe the best lineup the Met franchise has seen, especially since 06. What do you think of lining it up that way with the first 4 or 5 guys?
Yeah, the way I sit with it is at the end of the year, Juan Soto in the 2 spot is going to get 500 at-bats. If he hit 4th or 3rd, he may get 460 at-bats, 455. You want this guy up as much as possible. Sometimes the leadoff, the first inning is just overrated. Truly, it's overrated. Lindor is hitting leadoff, and then he'll never hit leadoff for the rest of the game. He's just hitting in that spot ahead of Soto. So I think over a full season of 162, you want your best guys getting as many at-bats as possible. All I know is I think Soto scored 123 runs last year. He was on base 305 times. You're going to ask Pete Alonso behind him. I know we had protection for you last year. Didn't go so great. Now you're the protection. It's on you now. And if it's not you, Nimmo. And I think Nimmo did a great job until his plantar fasciitis, I think, ate up his last 2 months. And then even it takes the pressure off Vientos. So I'm a little bit nervous about a sophomore slump, because he had, again, the expectations were so high. But Soto 2 to me is an absolute lock. I know it was a talking point. You need to get this guy up as much as humanly possible.
Yeah, it is the right decision. The one thing I toyed with, and I asked Carlos Mendoza, I was lucky enough to ask him, and he shut it down immediately. He made me feel like an idiot because he's like, nope, didn't even consider it. And I get it. Most Met fans, the email to the Rico was like, Evan, you're crazy. I love the idea of Alonso batting second, only because I think Pete, since 2019, has received the worst protection in baseball. And I actually went through it. I went through every single player that has protected Pete Alonso, and it's a laundry list of garbage. It's actually impeccable how many horrible baseball players have attempted. Daniel Vogelbach, I'll just give you one, who attempted to protect Pete. So there was this curiosity factor of, boy, wouldn't it be interesting for a month just to see Alonso protected by Juan Soto? But I get why it's not considered. I do believe in the modern thought that your best hitter should bat second. I think you laid it out beautifully. You just get more plate appearances, and you want your best player up as often as possible.
Yeah, and for Pete last year, right, at the last second of spring training, they signed JD Martinez, and even he has a down year, right? Like that wasn't even protection, even though they tried. But for Pete, I really do think if you listen to David Stearns' press conference about Pete coming back, when he slipped it out that Pete's a very motivated player this year, he's ticked off. He's very much ticked off, and he's a little bit of a different guy than he was the last 2 years. You get hit in the mouth sometimes in free agency, and I don't. To me, you could hit him second, you could hit him fourth. This is Pete's year or bust, right? He knows that, the fans know that, and I think it's a little bit of a different Pete than it was the last 2 years, and hopefully that helps because 2019 and 20. I know 2020 was a short season, but those first few years, man, he set the world on fire.
I'm not blaming you for this, all right? There's a vibe I got, all right? I'm not putting this on you, but last year, you may not remember, I came down to spring training for one day. I had my full beard out, and I wanted to talk to Pete Alonso. I talked to David Stearns. I talked to you for a little bit. And the vibe I got, and it's nothing you said, and it's nothing that Gelb said. It's nothing anyone said. But the vibe I got from everyone was Pete's gone at the end of the year. And I couldn't put my finger on why. And again, you didn't say it. No one said, oh, yeah, he's gone. It's just this. I went home on that airplane that night thinking, what the hell is going on? This beard is going to live forever, and then he's going to be gone. Was that a fair belief that you and others had, that for whatever reason, that it just felt like it was over for Pete? Did you feel that way last year, and how is your feeling this year with him on another one-year contract, really?
I think that kind of clouded feeling was accurate. I think, as we saw, there was a major disconnect in where Pete thought his game was and where the Mets thought his game was. And it turns out where the rest of the league thought Pete's game was. It wasn't as if everybody was asking Pete to come play, and he goes, no, I'll take less to play for the Mets. I think he had 2 poor years, and I think that's what I mean about a different Pete this year. If you listen to that press conference, he said, I had 2 bad years. He didn't say that last year. He didn't say that the year before in the midst of that. He kind of acknowledged that a little bit more, and I think recognizing that is strong because these athletes, they get booed, they get yelled out about on talk radio all the time. They kind of hear the noise, and so they have to tell themselves, I'm the best. They have to be in their own head. And so I've appreciated Pete's ability to do that over the last 2 years, but then his ability to call out the responsibility that these 2 years aren't going to give me the 10-year, $300 million contract that I wanted to. He wanted to see if he could get that this year. And the Mets, I do think, didn't want to give him that huge deal. Not that they were telling him to walk, but they were saying, here's what you get. And he said, all right, let me test the market. And then he came back, and here's less. And then he went, okay, hold on a second. And the fact that he went through that, he came back. I heard him talk about himself as this great hitter and now unfinished business. More of a team like Pete this year. And I hope that it works out for everybody. It's not out of the question to say that last year it was a little bit, I don't know if they want this guy around for a 10-year deal, if that's what he's looking for. If the Cincinnati, I don't even know, the Cincinnati Reds, the Detroit Tigers gave him 10 years, does he go there? Maybe, but the fact that nobody in baseball really wanted to shell out that long deal is not just a look at the Mets didn't want to bring Pete back long term. Baseball just looks at these first basemen so differently now.
It's why even if Pete has a great year, which I think think he is going to have a good year. You talked about his attitude change, the differences. Like, I could see him having a great year, and I don't think it's necessarily going to change his free agency. Like, I don't think a great year is going to lead to a 6 or 7 year contract. I think, unfortunately, because of his age, because of the position he plays, his body type, which is not fair, he's going to almost be stuck. I don't want to say in the same situation, but a similar situation, no matter how good his year is. And I certainly don't think David Stearns is going to change on it.
Yeah, to me, this is a 1 year deal. I mean, it's a 2 year deal, $30 million with an opt out. If he comes back, it's 24 for next year. It's a 1 year deal. He's going to do the exact same thing. And for the third year in a row, he's going to bet on himself. And I hate to say it, but we're all thinking it. If he falls flat on his face, the Mets may say, we gave you 3 chances, and it didn't work out. But again, I believe in what I've heard so far. I believe in the lineup and how I think on a nightly basis. You mentioned I might go up there with the 2006 Mets as one of the great offenses we ever see. And if he's part of that every single night, they can work out something moving forward, because Soto's going to be around, Lindor's going to be around, Nimmo's going to be around, Niemo's going to be around. And if he bets on himself and finally wins part of this core, you got to keep him around. But I'm very bullish on him this year, where last year I feel like he was in his own head thinking, well, I got to play for a 10-year, $300 million contract because that's what I think I'm worth. And that ate at him a little bit. I mean, he's a human being.
I think that for this team to be successful, they're going to have to be a top 5 offense in baseball. Like, their pitching can be decent, but they're going to have to be like, that's clearly going to have to be the identity of this team. What's your vision for this season? Do you think they're going to be that? Like, if you had to project here in the second week of March, or I guess it's the first week of March, I've lost track. We're 3 weeks away from opening day. What's your sense for what we're going to experience here in 25?
That starting rotation. I mean, if you watch a couple games a week, that's one thing. But, when you sit there night after night like I do, it's sometimes the depth guys, 4 or 5 starters, 6 starters. I mean, these guys are pitching Major League games. You need them to be strong. So I do have my questions about the starting rotation. But there is a chance, maybe in the back of the Mets front office mind, is they may just beat some teams up this year, right? They just score 6-7 runs a night, and that starter keeps them in it. Or they, quality start really for a 4 ERA, just a 4 ERA, 3 runs over 6 innings. Like, please, sign me up for a 4 ERA. And so you take your chance with the starting rotation. Bullpen is strong. I know we want the Mets to win the division, but Atlanta had a down year and still made the playoffs. Philly's got the best starting rotation in the division. I think it's going to come down to the Mets are going to make the playoffs. I guarantee that they will make the playoffs. Whether they win the division, I don't know. It's going to be.
You just made me very nervous guaranteeing a playoff spot, by the way.
Evan, you got to believe, baby. We heard that before. I'm not giving you 101 wins. I'm letting you know they're going to make the playoffs. If they win the division, icing on the cake. They really want the bye, which scares me more, actually, with seeing what's happened. But I guarantee you the Mets are going to make the playoffs.
Well, but by the way, from your lips to God's ears, as Beningo would say, I hope you're right. But I think, and I hope this is a debate come September, because I've already had it with some friends of how important is it to win the division. You even talked about the bye and how it's kind of been negatively affecting teams over the last few years. The way I view it is I want to win the division. It's just simple math. You have a better chance of going to the World Series if you have to win 2 less games because you're not in the wild card round. But I think when we get to September, if they're in a pennant race, while I want to win the division, all you got to do is get in. And I think not only have the Mets proved that, but the Phillies proved that a few years ago. And then when they win the division, they get knocked out by the Mets. So it's almost like, not that you're better off, because I don't buy that at all. I still think you're better off winning the division. Just simple math. But, yeah, it's just about getting in and then hoping at the right time you're playing the best baseball. But I guess what it comes down to is how important is winning the division in this modern world we live in?
Yeah, I think if you come out of the NL East and you win the division, you're probably going to get one of the 2 buys. And the reason the Mets want that is not because they want to break. It's because Manaea and Severino and the guys kind of ran out of gas in the sense that every day was an emotional win. I remember Brendan Nimmo going, I thought that was the greatest game I ever played. And then we played this game. Like, it took so much out of a team that they just needed a reset. I mean, at the end of it, guys, I'm sniffling on the plane. I haven't slept. We went Atlanta, Milwaukee, Atlanta, Philly, take a break, go to LA. Like, it was a lot. So I think more important than just get the bye, win 105 games is get rested for a little more of a downhill approach to the playoffs instead of you run through the Brewers, or you get a Pete Alonso home run to beat the Brewers, you run through Philly, and then the Mets felt like they just ran out of gas against the Dodgers. And the Dodgers, the way I felt, the Dodgers went, okay, NLCS, season just started. Like that's how it felt. And so I think the bye would help just get the little recharge downhill. But if they win 110 games and then they lose in 3 to Milwaukee, you're going to go, why would you say they should win the division?
It's part of why a lot of people are scared of the Dodgers, and I get it. They're loaded. They're the defending world champions. Their rotation has 1 million arms. They went out and had a very aggressive offseason. The reason I'm not scared of the Dodgers is they can win 120 games in the division series. They can get picked off, and not necessarily by us, as we almost saw last year. So it's not that the Dodgers aren't as good as the Mets. The Dodgers are the best team in baseball. No one can argue that. They are loaded to no end, but baseball presents itself in a way in which all the Mets have to do is beat them in a best of 5 or beat them in a best of 7. And that's just not impossible. So every time they made a move and people freaked out about it, I almost said, you know what, I'd rather them just continue to load up than the Phillies get better or the Padres get better or the Cubs get better, because that just makes it more good competition as opposed to just one super team where all they need to do, not even against us, is lose 3 out of 5 games and their season's over. And we saw them do it a couple of years ago, year after year.
I mean, the year before that, they went to Arizona and they got swept. I mean, Lance Lynn gave up 4 home runs in a game. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that they're the 1, the Mets are the 2, and they just get picked off on the way there. So there's no doubt about that. But just, I think from what I saw from the Mets last year, they could have used a day off, that kind of thing. But when you want sustained winning, you're going to be the 1 or the 2 seed. So eventually, I mean, I guess the Dodgers did this. You're going to have to learn how to live with the bye and use it to your advantage, because, the Dodgers had done that for 10 years in a row. And outside of the COVID year, that was really their only World Series. So you can still run off with the 1 or the 2 seed. It doesn't guarantee you a damn thing.
Not a damn thing. Now, here's my question. It's called the loser test. I am a loser. I got my scorebook ready for tonight's Met Marlin fake baseball game at Roger Dean Stadium. You are not broadcasting tonight. Are you going to walk across the street and watch a Met spring training game when you don't even have to work?
I will tell you this. I'll give you a good story. We did the game on Tuesday right here against the Cardinals. And Howie and I are having our not-so-great nachos before the game. And all of a sudden, who comes over? Somebody goes, "Hey, Howie, how you doing?" And Howie goes, "Hey, Rico, what's going on?" It was Rico Brogna.
Are you kidding me, my man? The podcast named God himself.
He's scouting for Seattle. And I go, this is unbelievable. Yes, your buddy, Pete Hoffman, the great Pete Hoffman, goes, "Hey, what are you doing on this weekend?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll jump on the Rico." And here's Rico Brogna. So unless Rico Brogna is going to be there tonight, I may go back to PGA National.
I don't blame you. I think, it's funny, and I assume it's a lot of people here who feel the same way as I do. It's just we miss baseball so much that it's like, give me a fake game in beautiful weather, and by the 4th inning, you look around and say, what am I doing here? Like, what's happening right now? But for you who've now been to a few spring training games, it does get old quickly. I'll tell you, when I was younger, 10 years ago, I'd come to Florida, and I would drive to like 5 or 6 different spring training sites. I follow the Mets, and I felt very fulfilled. Now I'm a little bit older. I don't do it as much, but it takes me 1 or 2 spring training games before I'm like, all right, we get the real stuff. It's the Beningo used to say this about football, non-alcoholic beer. And that's basically what this is. The sun is great. The summer is great. Seeing Juan Soto shuffle is great. But once you remember this doesn't count, it's like, all right, get me to the real stuff. I can't deal with this fake stuff anymore.
A great image of that was Pat McCarthy and I are in Fort Myers last week doing Mets Red Sox, right? And Paul Blackburn gets yanked out of the 1st inning. And they go to the bullpen. I'm looking at my phone, and people go, "Oh, my God, the sky is falling. Here's his final line. We go to the 2nd inning. And Blackburn comes out again. It's not real. They just need to get their reps in. So once you realize that, get sunburned, have a beer, crave that 2nd and 3rd, 2 outs, crunch time moment. Just know that you might be a little bit more emotionally into it. These guys are just trying to get their work in. They just happen to be selling tickets.
That's a good point. When I saw Blackburn come back into the game, my reaction was, I'm so happy I'm not scoring this game because I'd be pissed. I don't even know what I would do. What do I just add his line, or do I have to write his name a second? That's my question. That's my last question, because I don't want to keep you forever. Did you write his name a second time in the book, or did you just add the complete performance together? This is the question that me and 12 other people care about. Very important, though.
It's the Howie Rose mentality of spring training that I learned. My first year, I got a spring scorebook, and I scored every game. And now I print out the 2 sheets of the Bob Carpenter-esque scorebook. I tape it down. I do the game. Maybe I write his name in. I do not write the final line. I crumple it up, and I throw it away. And if you asked me 2 years ago, would you do that? I'd say that would be sacrilegious. But we're all just getting closer to the regular season.
Hold on, though. I got to tell you something, and you tell me if this changes your mind. So when Soto hit the home run in his first spring training game, everyone's like pretty excited, right? So I say to Hoffman, I say, I've scored every spring training game. Do you remember what Johan Santana did in his Mets spring training debut? Now, obviously, the answer is no. Who the hell would remember that? I go to my wall of scorebooks. I pull it out. I got to find out that Juan Gonzalez, on a spring training invite for the St. Louis Cardinals, a team he never played for, hit a first-inning 2-run home run off Johan Santana in his Met debut. No one would have known that if I didn't score it and keep it. Does that not give you pause on keeping your spring training scorecards? Keith Raad.
You might be onto something here. That's pretty cool. Now, forgive me if I didn't know. Do you still score every Mets spring game, or are you done?
No, so not every Mets spring game. No, I've scored 1 game. So far this spring, the first game that they played, the Soto home run game, I scored it. If I go to the game like tonight, I will score it. I admit it, my scorebook's almost ready, but I cannot. I'm 41 now. I've matured like a little bit. I got my fingers caught like a tiny bit, little maturity. So I don't do every game, but I'd say like 3 or 4 a year basically is my average. So on a loser scale, I'm like a 7 out of 10, not quite a 9 out of 10.
I think I'm with you in a sense that we have a place where the scorebook goes at the end of the year, right? We have a library. There's only so many books that can fit at the library, okay? So I'm not going to print out, go to my guy in Glen Cove, get my scorebook. I'm just going to print it out, do it for spring, crumple it up. It's a fleeting moment in time. And maybe you have me think that Juan Gonzalez note is pretty cool. You might have something.
Well, because the problem is it's so rare. Like, I don't know if 10 years from now when Soto is a long veteran Met, if it would be cool to look back at that scorecard. If it is, then you got to keep it. If not, we may say, who gives a crap? It was a spring training game. By the way, I do appreciate you coming on. You gave me a lot of time, and I do thank you for that on a Saturday night. So thank you for coming. We'll be listening to you all year. You've done an outstanding job. You are now one of us. At first, we're like, let's see if Keith can be one of us. You are now officially one of us, and you're doing a great job. And thank you very much for coming on, man.
That means a lot coming from you because, usually you're not supposed to listen to talk radio in the middle of the season. But if I'm not sure how the fans are feeling, I'll tune in and see how Evan is. And I'll go, okay, I'll take the temperature that way. So that coming from you, that really does mean a lot. But it's good to see you.
Good to see you, man. Thank you very much. Keith Raad, broadcaster for the New York Mets, who's kind enough to stop by live from Das Beer Garden for a very special spring training broadcast. And I do have, I can't find my bag. I do have my scorebook for today's game, which features Juan Soto playing. Hoff, how pumped are you to see Juan Soto for the first time? Does your microphone work, by the way?
No, it's not.
Oh, it does work. I kind of, no.
I'm talking into your mic, dude. Are you drunk?
I'm having a Moscow Mule, and I wouldn't say I'm drunk. I'd say that I'm enjoying it. Tastes very, very good. It was my wife's call. Thank you, baby. But, yeah, I'm feeling all right. What are you having to drink?
I had an IP. I need another one. I see a lot of people. They're asking if this is actually not a live Rico, but a drunk Rico. And I'm like, we're not tipsy yet.
I wouldn't say it's not quite yet. I need more than one Moscow Mule. But you know what you could tell the people? Because I was thinking about this. If anyone wants to come on and talk Mets or ask a question, they're allowed. But make sure they're like, do your scout. You're like a call screener. Make sure that, you want a quality conversation.
You want me to do my job?
Yeah, do your job.
I thought this was vacation.
How about that little kid? He's like 4 years old. How old is he? Do you want to come on the Rico?
This is Rob, and guess what his name is? Shay.
Really? Little kid's name is Shay? Very, very impressive. That's what I'm talking about. A little Met fan whose name is Shay, who's all. How are you, Shay? Actually, I've got to hold the microphone up. We only have one working microphone. I apologize. How are you, by the way? What's your name? Rob. Rob, so you name your son Shay?
And this is Shay right here who just dropped the microphone, buddy.
Don't worry, that microphone isn't even working. He's very nervous, but is this his first game, or have you been to a few games so far?
Why don't you tell him who's your favorite Mets player?
It's all right. I don't want to make him too nervous. But, hey, good luck. I like the shirt, by the way. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. 7-line shirt.
Yeah, I get one gift a year from my wife, and this is it. It's a 7-line shirt. We get it for spring training, and she got to say, huge fan of the pod. And I've got one question for you. I was thinking about it on my ride, quiet ride, only one kid screaming in the background. So I was wondering, I completely agree with you with Mauricio. Hang on, Dad, one second. He's not ready, obviously, for this year. But the reason that, you're not so high on him, I look at the guy and I say, guy's a gazelle. He's huge. You see the speed that comes off the ball when he hits it. Is it more a function of that he's just so far away and he's injured, or you don't think he's got the goods?
I believe in him, so I apologize if I've given off the perception that I don't. I think it's more he missed all of last year. And so it's tough to imagine a guy who missed basically the entire year, had a slow recovery, hasn't had minor league at-bats, forget major league at-bats in over a year, contributing right away. But when he was up here late 23, he was impressive. And he's a switch hitter, and you mentioned he's like a gazelle. And he looks like a great athlete. So I'm excited about him, but I think I need to see him go to AAA and just mash again. And I think once he does that, I'll probably be as excited as you are. But good meeting you, man. And good meeting you, Shay. Enjoy the game today.
All right, so we have another special guest, too. You may have heard his name before.
You sound wasted, by the way.
What's that?
You sound wasted.
No, it's only one beer. I haven't eaten anything at all. But
that's the problem. Hoff hasn't slept at all or eaten.
You actually were in a movie that his old boss used to be in.
Let's not talk about that movie. Oh, no, talk about the movie. Don't talk about my lines.
Scott the Engineer.
Scott, how are you, sir? And a diehard Met fan. And not only that, I remember, Scott, you left a very angry voicemail 2 years ago.
Angry, oh, my God.
What were you pissed about? Just the team in general?
Last year, the beginning of the season.
Oh, that's what it was. Right. Wow, that's fair enough.
It's like the end of May. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? This team's supposed to be better than this. They were great the year before, and then all of a sudden, boom. Yeah. I was so mad. I was like, come on. What are you doing?
So you didn't have faith that they were going to turn the season around, that they were going to call up a 34-year-old journeyman infielder. He was going to have a hit song, and then all of a sudden that's we're going to go on a run. You didn't see that happening?
Well, no.
That's the beauty of last year. None of us saw that happen.
No, I was like, all right, this is another lost year. Let's reset and try it again.
You have confidence this year at least?
It's weird because of what happened last year. It came out of nowhere. Now I'm like, do we still have out of nowhere? We got Soto, but they lost Severino, they lost Quintana, they lost Iglesias. So the team's kind of a little different. So hopefully Soto can make up for what they lost.
They got to score a lot of runs. That's the way I look at it, very simply. If they can mash and score a lot of runs and they can have just average to subpar pitching, they will be good enough to win 90 games and make the playoffs. The question is, can they score enough runs? Can they be a top 5 offense in baseball? And if they are, then I think we're all excited again in October.
Well, to do that, they need Alvarez to be a monster, and they need McNeil to hit like he did 3 years ago. Then they'll score a lot of runs.
All right, so you're like in the middle, I can sense.
Right in the middle. I'm not kind of like, yeah, we got it. I'm like, all right, just take it easy, nice. Let's see what happens. Don't go crazy. We know they got a good team. They just got to play.
Well, good meeting you, man. Thank you very much, and thank you for listening. And big fan, because I've heard you for many years.
I know a lot of people. It was a crazy ride, but
yes, it was. Thank you, man. Scott, we appreciate it. By the way, we mentioned this to Keith earlier, that Keith Raad, who joined us, if you missed any of this live, Rico, that it has now come out, at least according to, I think John Heyman reported it, that the lineup is going to be Lindor, Soto, Alonso, and then based on the pitcher they're facing, Mark Vientos or Brandon Nimmo. The reality is, I like it. I think it's one of those things with this lineup that it's tough to mess up the front 5. And then things are going to change based on the way guys perform. I mean, we saw it last year. I mean, think about last year and the way the lineup started and where it turned out. Like the move to Lindor going to the leadoff spot really sparked everything. It sparked him, and it changed everything about the lineup. So it's funny. I like this lineup, but the reality is it's probably going to change many times over. I mean, there's just no doubt. But my idea of Alonso batting second was always unrealistic. I just tried to give my reasoning on why I was intrigued by it. But I always knew it wasn't going to happen.
Can I give Carlos Mendoza my recommendation of Brandon Nimmo batting ninth?
I mean, you can, but he's going to shut you down worse than he shut down my Alonso idea.
Well, listen, I think it's a good suggestion, especially with his knee. He needs to ease into the lineup. He shouldn't jump in at fifth.
Well, I disagree with that, but the one thing I do, even though you're not saying it, so I can't say I agree with you, but I'm intrigued by is I like having a ninth place hitter who can get on base. I do. Like, I think there's a value to that because look who's coming up next. Look who's looking to drive runs in, Lindor and Soto. So, and I was talking about this with the Yankees last week about their lineup, which is certainly a lot more flawed than our lineup, obviously. And I thought, boy, if you have Judge leading off, which I'm intrigued by, you got to have guys batting eighth or ninth that get on base. I almost think that lineup should be constructed very differently, where your worst hitters are not batting eighth or ninth. Your worst hitters should be hitting, dare I say, sixth or seventh. And then 8 or 9 are the guys that can get on base just a little bit more, dare I say even steal base, and be up for your better hitters, your 1 and 2 or your 2 best hitters, to drive them in. Now, I look at this Met lineup and I say, okay, well, how does that fit? So one guy who you could think about batting ninth is Jeff McNeil, believe it or not, because he can, as we've seen, win a batting title. He can be productive. And if he is productive, he's on base in front of your best hitters, which is the whole point, right?
Yeah, but I mean, can he really hit the ball anymore? That's the problem. I mean, technically, we're looking for a guy who used to be a high average hitter. Now he's batting 230. It's concerning. I need to see him go back.
So that's it. He sucks now? Is that what you're telling me? You've given up?
Yes,
he's terrible.
We wanted to trade him for crying out loud.
Well, hold on. All right. So here's my opinion on Jeff McNeil. It has not evolved. It's not changed. It's the same thing. I wanted to trade him at the beginning of the offseason, assuming they could get a fair return. And to me, a fair return was back of the rotation starter, quality reliever. That wasn't out there, right? Okay. If it wasn't out there, I wasn't giving him away. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in taking a player that won a batting title a few years ago who can still be productive for you. I don't believe in getting rid of him for nothing. I thought if it made sense, you could trade him for something. Wasn't out there, didn't happen. Okay, starts the year at second base, right? What I said last year, and I'll say it again on March, what the hell is today's date? March 8th? The Moscow Mule's getting to me. I don't know the freaking date. March 8th. I will never buy in fully to Jeff McNeil, no matter how productive he is. So if he's hitting 340 and he's competing for another batting title, not necessarily during the season, but at the end of the season, I would still value in dealing him. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't just buy into him and say, oh, he's great now. Does that make sense? Did I express that well?
Yes, no, you did. I feel very confident in that too. That Jeff McNeil is someone that needs to be gone from this team eventually. I like Jeff McNeil, but I don't think he's who he once was. Even there's no power. He's not Luis Ariz. He's not consistent enough. It's time to move on eventually.
Yes, eventually. Just not now because they need him as the starting second baseman. We do have to run, though, Pete. I have to tell you that. And I want to thank Das Beer Garden because they were very kind. They allowed us to use this wonderful location. The next time I come back to Jupiter, which could be next year because I like spring training, I will come back here. They have treated us very well, and we've had a wonderful time. So thank you very much to Das Beer Garden. I thank everybody who came out. It was a fun experience, especially Keith Raad. I mean, think about Keith. Keith Raad basically said, I'm going to hang out and talk Met baseball for a half hour at Das Beer Garden. And you know why he came? Not to hang out with me. He knew the place was awesome. He's like, I'm going to have a drink. That's what I'm going to do. So it was a fun experience. We're going to the game tonight. And someone told me to say this, so I'm not doing this on my own. I'm going to do a live hit for SNI tonight for whatever their nighttime show is. And then tomorrow we're going to have another Rico Brogna at PGA National. So we'll have another live Rico here near spring training, maybe some interviews from some New York Mets. So it will be a fun time. But we appreciate you coming out, and we appreciate you downloading the Rico Brogna. And you can download and subscribe to Rico Brogna wherever you download your podcast. So we will talk to you Sunday. I'm going to guess about 5 or 6 o'clock, so you can check your YouTube feed or wherever I'll tweet it out once we go live. It'll probably be somewhat after the Mets afternoon game on Sunday afternoon. But thank you very much for listening, downloading, subscribing, and hanging out with a buzzed edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.